Hello, everyone. This is T. Welcome to Second Printing, where we give new life to comics and graphic novels that deserve another look, from the iconic stories to the hidden gems. So let's dive into the world of comics, where every story can be worth revisiting. Now, today we've got something special. Today, we start the complete history of the X-Men. Now, for most people, the X-Men, also known as Marvel's merry band of mutant misfits, usually need no introduction. Unless, you start counting X Factor or the New Mutants or Excalibur or the new X-Men. So, maybe introductions would be a pretty good place to start. In 1963, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, coming off of the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, came up with a whole new superhero team, the X-Men. Now, these were five young mutants, humans that were born with special abilities, and that's what made them different at the time. They didn't get theirs through any kind of accident or anything like that. They were born with their abilities. And they were led by Professor Charles Xavier, trying to fight to protect a world that hates and fears them. And actually, I said five, but we start with four. Our first lineup of X-Men is Scott Summers, Warren Worthington III, Henry Hank McCoy, and Bobby Drake. That's Cyclops, Angel, Beast, and Iceman for you. So Jean does join the team in this first issue, but she's not there at like the very beginning. So one thing about these early issues is it's definitely Stan Lee's writing. It's lots of really wordy exposition. It's really dated, but it's endearing for the most part. Like when Angel says, "With pleasure, Cyclops, old man," as the two of them adjust Xavier's lazy boy before a training session in, I guess, the living room. I don't know. He just kind of psychically calls them into the room that he's in and orders them to start demonstrating their abilities. It's that sort of ham fisted power demonstration that's supposed to inform the readers what each of these guys can do. Because obviously the code names have nothing to do with their powers, of course. Anyway, Xavier comes off kind of like a hard ass between the opening of the issue and the way we see him interact with the boys. And I want you to remember that feeling for later. But we get some really interesting early characterizations for our little quartet. Right now, the important thing is that Cyclops is a teacher's pet, and all the boys give each other shit pretty much constantly. Angel even has to get in between Hank and Bobby after Bobby froze Hank's arm, reminding them no fighting during class, remember? So apparently this happens often. From there, we get into the actual training session, and like, honestly, my notes just say this power montage sucks. That's really it. It's just weird to me that he wrote this the same year they started releasing The Amazing Spider-Man, because the first 100 issues of that are genuinely fantastic, but that is a different set of spandex for a different day. So Beast does some acrobatics, Angel flies through an obstacle course, and Iceman actually does not get a challenge. Because he's the youngest or something. I don't know. Xavier literally tells him to go play. It's wild, actually. Because then when Bobby starts bitching in his head, to himself, mind you, Xavier obviously can hear him and tells Hank to get ready to throw a bowling ball at his head once he's sufficiently distracted from pretending to be a snowman and yelling about standing in people's lawns. This is to test his reflexes, of course. Side note, I called Xavier a hard ass a little while ago. Well, let this be the first of many times that we acknowledge, because that will definitely be a recurring issue literally the entire time. Then we get the first demonstration of Cyclops' powers when Xavier tells him to put Beast and Iceman out of action without causing serious injury. So that actually tells us a couple of things. Xavier told Cyclops to attack two of his teammates at the same time. And this implies that Cyclops might have the strongest power, which, I mean, he doesn't. But for now, I guess we're supposed to think that he does. Or at the very least, that he's the most capable with his powers. I don't know. So Scott blasts Beast partway through a wall and then just demolishes a giant ice cube that Iceman is hiding in for protection. And yes, he's literally just standing in a man-sized ice cube to block Cyclops' optic blast. Obviously, this does not work for very long, and the professor tells Warren to join in so all the boys can have a good roughhouse for a few minutes to blow off some steam. That is, until he moments later psychically yells at them to get together because, and I quote, "I sense a taxi approaching our main gate. Within that vehicle is a new pupil, a most attractive young lady." So the early character drama for the X-Men mainly focused on everyone being thirsty for Jean, including the professor, which I know is creepy and problematic and blah 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 blah. Xavier himself actually comments on it being inappropriate for him to feel this way, but mainly because he's leader of the X-Men and in a wheelchair. Like, Jean's no older than 16 at this point, but it was also 1963. Now, let's move on, okay? Again, this early stuff is really just not great. Like, at one point, the X-Men literally fight a circus, who beat Iceman by wearing snow gear. Again, it is 1963. The X-Men actually go on to lose that fight, by the way, and I'm beginning to understand why this book was shadow canceled. Anyway, unsurprisingly, the teenage boys respond like teenage boys and saying things like, "Wow, she's a real living doll. Look at that face. And the rest of her." Like, keep it in your pants, Warren. God damn. So, somehow, Xavier previously contacted Jean to invite her to the school, but told her not to tell anyone except for her parents. He did not explain what kind of school this was, or what they even studied. So, in classic Stan Lee fashion, he's going to do it right now. We get this massive series of text walls where Xavier explains his backstory, that he's a telepath, and that Jean is a mutant possessing an extra power that normies do not have. And that is why he calls them X-Men. But we also get our first look at Jean's telekinesis, and it's, I don't know, they do it twice. She pulls a chair across the room, and then she throws Hank for kissing her without asking, which I'm not touching that right now. So after that bit of uncomfy nonsense, we get into the first appearance of my absolute goat, Magneto. And this classic version is very different from the way he is today. Basically, at this point in the comic, Magneto wants to take over the world because normies are inferior and they don't deserve it, which is very Namor of you. His plan, though, is just straight up intimidation. He rocks up to a base, disables some missiles, and he writes his name in the sky. He doesn't even really attack anyone directly, he just kind of flexes. But to be fair, that is 1000% what I would do with Magneto's powers. Just global disarmament, everyone's nukes get yeeted into space, go. Hilariously, the Daily Globe prints out that the sixth top secret launch of failure on the front page. So it can't be that much of a secret then, huh? That said, the sequence of Magneto taking over the base is pretty cool. And this part of his character, the overwhelming power, is perfectly maintained to the modern days. But we cut back to the X-Men for what might be the most talkative suit-up sequence I have ever seen. And then, in one of the most ridiculous parts of any superhero thing ever, Jean says that it's unbelievable that the professor could remotely control their jet with his thoughts. Like she isn't actually telekinetic. So with the team on the scene, Cyclops requests 15 minutes to deal with the threat. The army guys haven't had any success, so they figure the colorfully dressed teens might as well take a crack at it. Cyclops successfully blasts through Magneto's force field, but then passes out from the exertion of using his full power. Magneto actually gets hit by some psionic feedback from his shield breaking and gets staggered, but that's mostly because he was caught off guard. So he launches some heat-seeking missiles at the team, which leads to a pretty cool teamwork sequence. Bobby protects Angel by freezing most of the missiles, and then Beast and Jean tag team the last one and send it into some water nearby. And then in a line that feels really out of character for modern Magneto, he declares that not all those with mutant powers are fit to rule the Earth, and hurls a tank full of burning rocket fuel at the team, which seems to have beaten them. But then when he can't get around the flames because he temporarily forgot he can fly out this through the ceiling, I guess, he gets surprised again by Cyclops, who woke up a few minutes ago and blasts out of the ground like Naruto in the Chunin exams. And at this point, Magneto just leaves. He just flies away and drops a force field to block behind him. So the X-Men get their congratulations, and somehow this wrapped up in less than 15 minutes. So the general or whatever thanks them, and in the fattest lie ever, promises that the X-Men will be the most honored name in his command. But the X-Men go home, Magneto driven off, but not captured. And that is our first adventure. So I don't really like the second issue very much at all. It's not good. Like, it just isn't. Vanisher gets introduced, but who really cares about the Vanisher? His main claim to fame is being in Deadpool 2, but that's not even how his power works anyway. Like, it's not invisibility. But whatever, let's get to it. So we see the teams just kind of gallivanting around town, getting into little bits of trouble, minor heroics, that kind of stuff. and Xavier calls them home so he can project his thoughts on the wall like a movie. Not sure why he'd need to do that in the first place, but let's just blame the limitations of the contemporary imagination. This time we do get an intro to the actual Danger Room, which is cool. And for the uninitiated, the Danger Room is hugely important to the X-Men. It's their ultimate training ground. Eventually, it uses a combination of like holodeck-like hard light and robotics to recreate a near infinite number of training scenarios. This is not that Danger Room yet. It's more like a specialized gymnasium with weapons and obstacles. At first, this seems like another scene to show off powers, but there's actually a little bit more going on here. We get this focus on the rate of improvement for Beast and Angel and what specific areas they need to improve. And one thing I've always really enjoyed with the X-Men in general is the grounded progression of the capability that young mutants get to have. Characters who can't control their powers when they're introduced to get to grow to a point where they can. It's good stuff. I like it. Anyway, Vanisher's basic ass goes on a ridiculous crime spree where he asks the cops to direct him to the nearest bank because he intends to rob it. After some lip about costumes and intentions not being illegal, they do tell him. So he robs it and vanishes. Obviously. This dork gets a bunch of goons to follow him, thinking they'll never go to jail when he can just teleport away. And the professor makes a psychic phone call, I guess it's more like radio, to some random FBI guy because he's just connected like that, and gets an update on this week's dingus, who is currently in the middle of stealing continental defense plans from the Pentagon, which is really just four guys guarding a table. So he pops out and runs into the X-Men and proceeds to just wreck their shit. For some reason, he has pocket chloroform in a can and just KOs Jean, who so far in this issue has only had limitations tacked onto her telekinesis. Like, I realize we are years away from the Jean Grey who's zipping around the galaxy, boxing Thanos and Galactus or whatever's happening in the Phoenix comic right now. But seriously, wow. So the team goes home, having failed miserably, and of course descend into infighting for like half a panel because they're bitter about losing and start blaming each other. In light of this, Xavier decides since they are clearly out of their considerably shallow depth, like the Mad Titan, he'll do it himself. So they all rock up to the White House because the Vanisher is like ransoming the country or something, and Xavier just immediately mind wipes him on the spot. Like, this guy is completely neutralized. In my opinion, the moment is actually really undersold. Like, the implications of the ease with which Xavier does this should be troubling. But the team handles the riffraff and Xavier whammies everyone else so the normies don't know that he is also a mutant. It's totally chill. After all of that, we pick up with a familiar training sequence and a bold-faced lie from the creative team, claiming, of all the great Marvel epics, this may be the greatest. Complete cap. This is the circus fight issue that I mentioned earlier. That said, the way that Blob starts tweaking after he finds out he's a mutant, and Magneto, and Vanisher, I better understand why people might hate mutants in general. But continuing where we left off, Xavier lets everyone know he's detected a new mutant. The boys fight over who gets to partner with Jean. It's a regular day. Bobby and Hank are arguing, but Jean wants to partner with Scott anyway. But Angel doesn't really give a single shit and literally swoops in and sweeps her off her feet. It's just, rich dick stuff. So the search begins, and immediately the takeaway for me is that this is a group of teenagers. They are big dumb. Bobby mistakes a magnifying glass trick for heat powers, and Hank can't see that a window washer is standing on transparent glass, so he thinks he's flying. And eventually, after ruining a carnival game for no reason, Cyclops finds their guy, and we get to meet the Blob for the first time. He's fat, he's super strong, he can't be moved against his will, and has some level of invulnerability. That's really it. Immovable object of character. Clearly henchman fodder, but evidently not this time. Because not only does he only agree to come check out this X-Men stuff because he wants to hit on Jean, when they do arrive, he just breaks all the equipment and then tells them all to kick rocks. Naturally, Xavier takes this poorly. Apparently Chuck hasn't been told no to this offer before and can't let Blob leave with knowledge of their identities or whatever. So we gotta whammy him. Again. This also goes poorly. Angel just gets absolutely ragdolled by this guy. Bobby can't fucking aim. and all Jean can do is move Xavier out of the way and close the door. Beast attacks and damn near bounces off, thoroughly concussed. So Blob escapes into the sewer and regroups at the carnival. So as the X-Men get their shit together, Blob decides that he gotta strike first, after he takes control of the carnival. So he sets off to attack the X-Men at home with a giraffe. And the team holds their own for a little while, but they get overwhelmed after Cyclops exhausts himself and those dread parkas subdue Iceman. While the X-Men are busy getting their shit rocked, Xavier is building an amplifier that'll boost his psychic blast so he can whammy 50 carnies and one very large man all at once. After telling Jean to use her telekinesis to free herself and the team, because no one else had thought of that, they catch up to and block the carnies from reaching Xavier, and this time manage to strategically subdue all the attackers. Xavier brain blasts everyone in our second, admittedly lighter, Xavier Ex Machina, but under even crazier circumstances. Like, Charles just feels very cavalier about protecting their identities until after he's already jeopardized them. Like, there's no vetting process. If you're a mutant and you let them, they bring you in. But that's actually going to bring our first episode of the complete history of the X-Men to a close. I just want to thank you all so much for checking out this first video. If you want to see more, consider subscribing, dropping a like below, and please tell me some of your favorite comics that you'd like to see covered. For now, I'm T, this is the second printing, and remember, just because you're different doesn't mean you're alone. I'll see you next time.